Welcome to Big Energy. I'm your host, Kassi Underwood, here to give you a dose of that good energy and talk with people who do it best. Each week, I bring you the knowledge we need to be the forces of nature we came here to be. Hi, friends. Welcome back to another week of Big Energy. I'm really thrilled and honored to bring today's episode to you because it's something that's so near and dear to my heart to talk about how to start a revolution. But it's really so much deeper than that for me and for you as well. No matter who you are listening, this touches you. It matters in your life. Before I share with you what you can do to start a revolution, we need to talk about Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson, who was the first guest on this podcast, is running for president. If you didn't know that, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to explain to you why you didn't know that. Marianne is running as a Democratic candidate. She is not running as an independent. If you're a Democrat, she is not going to split the vote. This will not be another Ralph Nader situation because these are the primaries and Marianne is running to be the Democratic candidate instead of Joe Biden. We need for her to become the Democratic candidate. The reason I'm breaking this down in such simple terms is because so many people who love Marianne and even who are my listeners on this podcast have not been political in the past. Marianne is most famous for her book, A Return to Love, and for being someone people have turned to through the years for their spiritual well-being, for their mental health. She has been listening to Americans for her 40-year career. She knows deeply what plagues this country because she has spoken to so many people about their personal lives. She has helped so many people through everything that they've been going through in life. I want to share with you the quote that she is most famous for because you've definitely heard this before and you'll be like, oh, really? She said that? I thought it was Nelson Mandela. And while that's very flattering for her to hear, I'm sure, it's not Nelson Mandela's quote, it's Marianne Williamson's. This is the most famous quote by Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Marianne Williamson, A Return to Love, Reflections on the Principles of A Course in Miracles. Many people who have turned to her for spiritual wisdom are also not the most political people on the planet. So we have a history of these transformational folks to kind of check out of politics. And if that is you, if you'd rather just sit on a mountaintop, as the French say, if you do not do politics, politics will do you. So all of this is coming to your doorstep. We can ignore it all we want, but it's happening. It's affecting us. Our lack of participation in politics is why we see some of the things happening right now is we're not participating enough. We are being available for candidates to completely betray us with what they say they're going to do. Joe Biden said he would protect the environment, and then he turned around and signed the Willow Act, which approves oil drilling in Alaska. Roe v. Wade has been overturned. Our not participating, our just thinking that other people are going to handle it, it's affecting us. We are being affected by politics, whether we think that it matters to us or not. So we can't really just sit by anymore. And it's time that we really take a stand. And I'm going to talk to you about that today. So I want to talk to you about what's happening to Marianne in the media. The first time that she ran, Marianne was cast as this orb lady, not to be taken seriously. You would also notice if you went back and watched the clips in Detroit that when she talked about racial injustice and enslaved people being promised 40 acres and a mule, that she got huge standing ovation, positive reactions, and then they would cut to commercial break because the media doesn't want you to know that she's making waves. And we need to be aware of the way that she is being portrayed in the media. The first time she was cast as very crazy, not to be taken seriously. Now she's such a threat that she's being omitted. So she's just not being included. She's not being included on the graphics. She's not being included in the polls. And when she is included in the polls, she's polling at 9 or 10%. That's really good at this stage. 9 or 10%, especially when you're being completely left out of the media and the press. She's not getting this big blitz the way that people were covering Trump. She's getting almost no media attention. And if she gets anything, it's a hit piece. It's a negative portrayal of her that she's still polling at 9 or 10%. So imagine if she got a lot of press and if she was portrayed as the serious candidate that she is. Imagine what would happen then. They're calling her a kooky. They're calling her crazy. And I just want to say to all the women out there, don't you see what's happening here? It's like the same thing that happens to women every day. Have you ever been with a boyfriend who, as soon as you call him out on his shit, he calls you crazy? You get gaslit the minute that you're like, wait a minute, motherfucker. Now you're the crazy one. That's the same thing. Your experience with that boyfriend is what is happening to Marianne on a large scale. She is calling the government and the system out on its shit. They don't want more women to hear it because we are going to get angry and we are going to start a motherfucking revolution, because once you hear Marianne, you can't unhear her. So they're calling her crazy because it works. It works. And if they can't fool you by calling her crazy, if you see the underlying patriarchy in that, then they're going to lure you into their story by calling her a bitch. This is the modern witch burning. Instead of she's a witch, she's a witch, she's a witch, now it's she's a bitch, she's a bitch, she's a bitch. Do you get it? The reason this is happening is because a spiritual woman is the greatest threat to the status quo. There is a long history of spiritual women being left out of the narrative, their voices being suppressed, or them being literally killed. So if you're buying the media narrative that Marianne is crazy, quote unquote, or not a serious candidate, I would love for you to consider the possibility that we have all been conditioned to not take ourselves seriously as leaders, as people with something to say. And it's really easy to project that onto other women, especially when she's getting a reputation for it. It's kind of like, we were in high school and everyone would create a rumor about a girl in school. And then it's like you didn't want to be associated with her because, oh, she's got this reputation. Then you meet her and you're like, wait a minute, I like her. She's fucking cool. Like, what is everybody even talking about, first of all? And second of all, she's an empowered ass bitch. Like, wait, where is this coming from? And you start to wonder why these rumors have been told about her. That's the same thing happening here. All of us have internalized sexism. We've been conditioned for it. We hear rumors about other women and we get scared that we're going to get taken down too. But I want you to be more powerful than that. I want you to be more of a badass than that and really own what you believe, rather than just kind of go along with what everybody else is saying so that you don't get left out of the party, so people don't think that you're a loser or whatever. Like, who fucking cares what they think? Let's get Marianne Williamson elected president. Go look at her policies page. Go to Marianne2024.com and look at where she stands on the issues that matter most to you and how she is going to address the underlying issues that have created the absolute disaster that we're seeing in America today. People depressed and on drugs, aren't making a living, can't make one mistake without ruining their lives. What's happening to us? Go look at Marianne's policies and consider it. Consider that we need everything that she is talking about. We need a true health care system. We need children's rights. Nobody ever speaks up for the children. Why is that considered not a serious issue? We need to be creating peace, not just building to defend ourselves in war. If you care about female empowerment, about feminism, now is your moment to show up. And where you can show up is Boston this Friday, where Marianne will be speaking. I will be introducing Marianne, and it's my greatest honor. All are welcome. It's free. You don't have to register. You can just show up. This Friday, June 30th at 7:30 p.m., it's at Unity Boston at 70 Colchester Street in Brookline, Massachusetts. You just need to show up to hear it, to hear her, not what people have said about her. We cannot sleep on this. We must show up for her. We must speak up for Marianne. A flock of women, millions of women surrounding this woman because her mission is our mission. If you're somebody who has a yoga mat, who envisions a world of love and community, of equality and justice and fairness. She's been speaking on that. This isn't her first time around the block. Joe Biden literally stole her book title for his presidential slogan. She wrote a book in the 90s called Healing the Soul of America. Then suddenly it was his presidential slogan? What? Marianne's been doing this for years. She's an excellent candidate. This is the only time we have ever seen a transformational woman, a woman like us, a mother, someone who meditates on a daily basis, who deeply understands the intricate issues that have been plaguing this country, who wants to create a totally new vision for the future of this planet. If we don't get behind her now, if we remain silent as she is trivialized and ignored by the media, she may be the last transformational woman we see running for president for a long time. So our work now is to get behind this campaign until that critical mass is reached and people finally click in that, yeah, she can win actually, and she will. What a lot of people want to know from me is, how did I meet Marianne Williamson? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story and how you can start a revolution. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, which is how I was first introduced to Marianne Williamson's work. For 40 years, she's been the leading teacher of this text. A Course in Miracles is a metaphysical text that transforms your thinking from a thought system based on fear to a thought system based on love. It consists of 3 books, a theological text, a workbook for students with 365 lessons, one for each day of the year, and a manual for teachers. I met Marianne in person during my first year at Harvard Divinity School when she came to speak in 2015. And at that time, I was fairly new to A Course in Miracles and had been on lesson 135 for approximately 6 months. After her lecture, I wanted to ask her what I thought was a very important question. What do I need to do to disrupt the status quo? I thought this question was so complex and so complicated that it was going to take her at least 10 minutes, but possibly even a lunch date to answer. So just to be considerate to the other people wanting to speak with her, I waited to be the last person in line. And an hour later, I finally get to her and I say, Marianne, how do I disrupt the status quo? And Marianne said, are you a student of A Course in Miracles? And I said, yeah, I've been on lesson 135 for 6 months. And she said, keep doing it. And then it was like a force field. She took a step back and I was like, oh, okay, guess we're not going to lunch. So I went home and I turned to lesson 136 and I kept doing it. And I finished all 365 lessons in the workbook. And now the course is my daily spiritual practice. I went on to write my master's thesis at Harvard on A Course in Miracles. And I argue that human beings cannot build a revolutionary future in our personal lives or in humanity on a foundation of anxiety and limiting beliefs. And I have found it so interesting. The same people who are like, oh gosh, I just don't know if Marianne can win, are the same people who talk about manifesting. What? Just manifest it, girl. If you believe in manifesting so much, if you teach manifesting for a living and you're not getting behind Marianne because you think she can't win, you should teach something other than manifesting. Because this is the thing we most need to manifest. If this is the candidate that you want, but you just think, oh, I would, but she won't, teach something else. But if you really believe in manifesting, let's do this thing. So I want to talk to you about how to start a revolution. Many years ago, I didn't even know how many, like 18 years ago, I was a college student double majoring in bad relationship decisions and warm PBR. I hit rock bottom and got sober when I was 20 years old. And I believe the choice to get sober was my first true act of defiance against the status quo, deciding not to be numb. But then I had to learn how to manage my mind. So in the 12-step program, they say that the problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind. The alcohol is not the problem. The problem is in my mind. But in order to quit drinking, in order to heal the mind, you have to get your spiritual house in order. So getting sober is not about avoiding the bar scene or RSVPing no to every wedding and family holiday. Getting sober is about conditioning yourself to go anywhere alcohol is served with peace and ease. In order to do that, you don't work on getting sober. You condition your mind for sobriety. You work on connecting with your higher self, your inner self, your higher power. As you pray and meditate, you begin to feel peaceful and you don't need it anymore. As you address the underlying root causes of the need to drink, to feel better in life, to have fun in life, you just don't need it anymore to have fun. So you work on your spiritual condition. That's how you do it. You face your fears over and over again rather than running away from them. You look at the truth of self-centered actions. You make amends to people that you've harmed. And by doing this work, you build a relationship with a power greater than yourself. Faith doesn't come just by thinking about it. You can't just be like, oh, I'll just have faith that will work out. Fuck no. I don't have any faith until after I've done the thing that scares me. Faith comes after you do what scares you, not beforehand. So spirituality is basically just learning the disciplines, the daily disciplines to create a mind that can receive intuition, that can receive intuitive thoughts, that can feel peaceful, that can be quiet, that feels love, that feels this really good energy, that feels fun, that feels lit the fuck up by life without needing alcohol. I knew how to feel lit the fuck up. I didn't know how to do it without alcohol. And I learned through getting sober how to feel lit up about life. So for me, to feel lit up by life, to really get that what's good for you is good for me, that equality serves everyone, that justice serves everyone, that if I owe money and I pay that money back to someone, we both feel good. If I owe money, this is, by the way, how Marianne Williamson talks about reparations for slavery. It's not enough to say, I'm sorry if I owe money. I'm still going to feel bad and you still don't have your money. Reparations for slavery is, I owe you money. Here it is. Now that's justice. And now forgiveness can take place. So that for me, this daily practice of making amends, it's called amends, by meditating, by facing myself, by looking at the truth of my actions, by seeing where I'm being selfish or dishonest and really going back and telling the truth. By doing this work, I build this relationship with a power greater than myself. So for me, the daily spiritual practice is how the revolution begins. The same principles that apply to the individual apply to the collective. The same principles that apply to a person apply to a nation. Marianne Williamson understands this. For centuries, women like Marianne with personal spiritual power and understanding have posed a major threat to the status quo, which gets off on inequality, which gets off on injustice, which gets off on sexism, on our internalized sexism. The status quo lives and breathes on us not getting it when they are maligning Marianne as being crazy and leaving her out of stuff and we don't say anything. They get off on that. That's how it survives. So we directly play into the status quo when we don't do something. Here are a few examples of women who have threatened the status quo with their divinely inspired spiritual practices and deeper understanding throughout history. Mary Magdalene, shamans, European and American witches and midwives. At Harvard Divinity School, I learned that Mary Magdalene had a gospel with her name on it that was not included in the canon. Those who are raised Christian will know these. We have the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of Mark, and the Gospel of Matthew. And we have evidence to suggest that Mary was a serious disciple of Jesus. Not only a disciple, but perhaps even his most beloved disciple and maybe even his love partner. But there is no Gospel of Mary in the canon, even though there was enough material on it that we spent a full semester studying it at Harvard with Professor Karen King. That's one example. Predominantly female shamans in the Philippines were maligned, discredited, nearly erased by organized religion and forces of colonization, patriarchy, and elite feminism. I learned this in another class at Harvard called Women in Shamanisms, taught by Grace Nono, life-changing class. And then we have an estimated 50 to 100,000 wise women, also known as witches, burned in early modern Europe. 50 to 100,000 women burned in early modern Europe. Like, hello, where I'm opening for Marianne this week in Boston, famous witch trials. And the whole thing was started by girls, by teenage girls. It's the internalized patriarchy, my loves. It's not that if you don't support Marianne that it's patriarchy. This is the issue. If either A, you haven't given her a chance and you're just going by what the media thinks, look more deeply because there might be something there for you. Or if you've thoroughly researched her and you think that she is the best candidate who most closely represents your values, and yet you don't think that she can win, that's just internalized patriarchy. It's just like we just don't believe in ourselves. Let's believe in women. Let's believe in ourselves. This is it. This is where they're burning the witches, my loves. This is another witch burning. And here in the United States, in the early 1800s, the medical establishment marshaled the forces of racism and classism in a calculated smear campaign to discredit midwives, who, again, were really the wise women. They were ushering new life into the world. They knew how to create medicines. We see the remnants of these acts of trivializing and discrediting female visionaries and leaving them out of the quote-unquote canon today. And so one example is when you turn on mainstream news stations, which presidential candidates are included in the list and who is left out. Professor Karen King at Harvard teaches 3 questions that I think are really relevant here. What work does this do? For whom? And with what effects? The answer to those questions are here for you to consider. The common denominator among the Gospel of Mary, the shamans, the witches, and the midwives is that these women were teaching that the power of healing and of liberation is within us, not the established institution, that we each have a voice within us, what A Course in Miracles calls the internal teacher that gives us unexpected direction and insight. I believe it's time to step it up with our spiritual practices. Just 1 minute of meditation a day can condition your mind for an insight. I believe we should have good meditation hygiene. So sit up straight when you meditate, no lying down, and please, no meditating while driving. Meditate in the morning before you meet the events of the day. It does no good if you're meditating after having dealt with all the shit of the day. Meditate before you watch the news. See how that changes what you hear. Meditate before you listen to those podcasts. See if that raises your awareness to what's being said and what's not there, what's left out. Pray each morning. Pray to anything. Doesn't matter what you're praying to. The trees, the earth, God, Holy Spirit, whatever you pray to that and ask that your thoughts be placed on a higher plane. A Course in Miracles suggests asking, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say? And to whom? And we have to go deeper. I believe the revolution requires us to take 3 metaphysical steps that really do apply to the nation just as they apply to us. One is exposing our defects of character, like self-pity, dishonesty, and judgment of others. Second is allowing these defects to be transformed. So self-pity turns into self-empowerment, dishonesty turns into truth and honesty and integrity, and judgment of others turns into acceptance and action. Sometimes that judgment is us just not taking action the way we need to. Then turning our minds completely to a new possibility, something that has never happened before. The spiritual life is not a theory. Politics is not a theory. This is a daily discipline like brushing your teeth, and nobody can do the work for you. When you decide to give birth without an epidural, you don't wing it. You train yourself for the revolution of giving birth. So 6 years ago, I became pregnant. And being knee deep in my resistance to the status quo, this is when I really revved up to the next level. I decided to have a home birth, which meant no epidural. I see and saw then the interventions done at birth, especially if it's not a conscious choice by the person giving birth to have these interventions, as an extension of the same patriarchal forces that leverage sexism and racism to try to end midwifery. No judgment on anyone. You should birth however the fuck you want to. That's my feminism, is you get to do life the way that you want to, as long as it's not hurting anyone else. So I researched epidurals, and here's what I learned that blew my mind. Being numb makes it harder to give birth. Part of the benefit of home birth is that you don't have to actively resist the well-meaning hospital staff if they come at you with all the interventions. You can just focus on giving birth, focus on the internal revolution. So labor begins, and I'm at home, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm hanging out in the living room. 30 hours into labor, we found out that my son had lost weight in the womb. So my then husband turned to me and said, should we go to the hospital? And I said, that sounds like a good idea. This is where all the training came in. I had to be centered while giving birth in the depths of the institution. I had to go to a hospital and give birth without an epidural that they really wanted me to do, because that was just part of their system. Nobody was doing anything wrong. It was just that's what this system does. The system does what it is trained to do. So I was there giving birth in a different way, and I was going to have to tell them over and over again, no epidural, no inducement, no C-section, no IV. The list goes on. And I was going to have to remain completely calm because I had a fucking job to do. I was giving birth. So I went into this primal state of meditation and prayer for 5 hours straight. And I could do that because I'd been practicing every day. I moved into the executive state. I pointed to the nurse and I said, you, regulate the water temperature. I pointed at my husband and I said, you, hold my hand. I pointed at my mother and I said, you, leave the room if you're going to talk the entire time. And around 11:30 p.m., the nurse said she had lost the baby's heartbeat. Everyone flipped out. Nurses were running around. Someone was calling the NICU. There were 8 medical staff surrounding me. But I had trained for this. I couldn't get wrapped up into the drama. I had the most power in the room. My job was to keep calm and give birth. And 45 minutes later, my son was born, and he let out his first little squeal. And today he is a healthy little boy who is 5.5 years old. Fear and anxiety didn't get to take over. My spiritual practice took over when it was showtime. And in this country right now, it is showtime. We are being conditioned and told what to think about and how to think about it at all times. We are being conditioned by the information we are given or not given, by the stories that we're told and how they're told, by religion, by media, by the education system, by our family's beliefs and old sayings, by relationship dynamics and social norms. It is a constant deluge of thoughts and beliefs that are not our own. We are drunk on all this conditioning, and I believe it's time we get sober. I'm here to tell you, we can't wing it. We have a daily reprieve from the status quo. So if you wake up and you check your cell phone before you've meditated that morning, you've just been had. If you find yourself festering with resentment and are not praying for that person with whom you are angry, that's status quo thinking, and you've just been had. If you accept information being fed to you without questioning what work it is doing, for whom, and to what effects, you've just been had. If we're prepared, we can do it. We can get sober from status quo thinking. We can dismantle the patriarchy. We can give birth to this revolution that I believe Marianne Williamson is leading. If you're not prepared, you're going to want to be numb. So I am going to tell you what Marianne Williamson told me. Whatever you are doing to condition yourself for this revolution, keep doing it. And please join us this Friday, Boston, Massachusetts, 7:30 p.m., I'll be introducing the next president of the United States. I'll see you there. That was another episode of Big Energy with me, your host, Kassi Underwood. Were you into it? Go ahead and click the subscribe button and leave a review. You can also find me online at KassiUnderwood.com. See you next time.